What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the video. So you guys sent me a video, and it is from What Culture Star Wars. You guys love when I review these, so I'll just keep on doing them as long as you guys want me to. So if you guys have any suggestions, you want to see me do videos like this, let me know in the Net Entertainment Discord. Go to the suggestion tab and just submit it, and if I use your suggestion, I'll give you a shout out. But today's video is called 10 Star Wars Controversies That Divide Fans. I'm going to check out this video. I'm going to see whether I agree with them or if I disagree, and if I want to make a counterpoint, I'm going to make a counterpoint. Now, with that said, let us begin.
Controversies that divided fans. Number 10. Did Luke use the dark side on the Gamorrean Guard? Return of the Jedi marked the end of the first trilogy in the Star Wars franchise.
I always wondered this.
Yeah, our central protagonist was in the final stages of his hero's journey. He was no longer the naive idealist who sought adventure and kinda fancied his sister. Instead, he had become a battle-seasoned starfighter and a confident Jedi Knight. Episode 6 saw Luke entering Jabba's palace before using a most un-Jedi-like technique on a pair of Gamorrean guards, that being, of course, force choking. This triggered a long-running debate about whether or not Luke channeled the dark side in this scene, and this is a debate that has been fueled by all the contradictory material surrounding it. See, in Empire Strikes Back, Yoda specifically told Luke that the Jedi use the Force only in defense and never to attack. So, throttling a few helpless pig guards seemed a little bit out of character. In later Star Wars Legends novels, though, Luke's actions were somewhat redacted. In The Heir to the Empire, for instance, one line reads, quote, "Walking into Jabba's palace on Tatooine 5 years ago, using the Force to befuddle the Gamorrean guards," end quote, indicating that Luke's actions were some kind of mind trick rather than an act of violence. On the other side of the argument, this action is indicative of Luke's entire struggle. I mean, after all, he was dabbling in the dark side throughout Return of the Jedi, even channeling hatred to cut off Vader's hand in their final duel.
So my view on that, I always did think like, oh yeah, Luke used the dark side. But that was the whole point of like Luke's Jedi training. You know, like Luke Jedi is different from prequel Jedi and prequel Sith. Even you could make that argument. You know, what Luke is attempting to do is he's effectively taking both abilities from both the light and the dark, and he's making I guess you could say more of like a gray Jedi take on things. So I never really viewed it as Luke choked those guys till they died. I kind of saw it more as though he choked them until they passed out, and then he stopped choking them. So they didn't die, he just knocked them out, which I think is okay. I think if you use the dark side for something good, then the dark side isn't always just evil. You know what I mean? Like, just because the Sith would usually use the dark side for bad doesn't mean someone couldn't use the dark side for something, I guess you could say, good in a way. I think it's all just a line. You know, you just don't go too far over on either side of the lines, you know, and I think you can stay good. So that's always been my view on that. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments.
Glorians. Throughout the first trilogy,
this one is so
presented
annoying
as a mystical energy not dissimilar to magic.
I'll get it.
Indeed,
We'll finish
those
this
who
and I'll
believed
tell
in
you
the
why it's
Force were
annoying.
considered to be superstitious. Vader was described as having a, quote, sad devotion to that ancient religion, and even Han Solo dismissed it as hokey. Although it becomes clear that the Force is very real in this universe, it was never quite clear what it was. It was just one of the features that blurred George Lucas's epic sci-fi tale into the realms of fantasy. With the prequels, however, Qui-Gon Jinn explained that the Force was largely to do with microscopic intelligent life forms called midi-chlorians. They attached themselves to Force-sensitive beings, forming a symbiotic relationship which gave Jedi their power. One could even measure someone's midi-chlorian count through scientific testing. For many fans, though, this explanation seemed to ruin the magic of the Force entirely, demystifying it with a load of scientific-sounding jargon.
Blah, blah,
it also begs the question,
that's
why
a bunch of original
was
trilogy
everyone in the
supremacists,
original trilogy
babies.
so skeptical about the Force's existence when there were established scientific ways of measuring it just years before? Number 8. Jar Jar Binks.
I always saw it as the Force itself is this mystical force. It's a magic, effectively, and the midichlorians are the things that allow people to use said magic. I never mind it. I look at it, though, as the original trilogy is more of a space fantasy, where the prequels are more of a science fiction. There's extra reasons for why things are the way they are. Do I understand people's arguments against it? Yeah. But do I think that people usually just complain about it because they're big babies? Yeah, it's a lot of it started in the early 2000s when the original trilogy supremacists, they saw the prequels, they didn't like it, and this is one of the things that they latched onto. To not like midichlorians is fine, but to like absolutely hate it and use it as like a precedent for why the prequels are terrible and unredeemable, you're just dumb. I'm sorry, that's the way it is.
Binks.
Jar Jar
Each
Binks.
Star Wars trilogy
I
has
disagree.
had their own controversial
We're getting to this
alien
one.
species. The original movies had the Ewoks, the sequels contained the Pogs, and the prequels contained Jar Jar Binks. When the prequels dropped in the early 2000s, they were bombarded with criticism, and Jar Jar became a central target of this ridicule.
Jar Jar
he was
midichlorians.
described as clown-like,
That's what they
silly,
attack.
and even accused of playing into racial stereotypes. For those who
No,
were old enough to see
get
the
outta
original
here.
trilogy when
Get
it
outta
came
here.
out, the childish
stereotypes.
aspects of Jar Jar simply trivialized the Star Wars universe. For those who were children during the prequels, though, Jar Jar was a favorite. He was the comic relief in a story that became very dark.
Whoa.
So this divide in opinion kind of comes down to just being an age thing. The backlash received by the character, though, actually did lead to George Lucas discarding a plot point that gave the Darth Jar Jar theory some credence. Ahmed Best as well, who played Jar Jar, admitted that the character was actually supposed to have a much more sinister story arc. There was even a scrapped scene in which Palpatine confided in Jar Jar about his plans for the Empire, but Lucas rightly didn't push his luck with this character anymore.
Guys, it's almost crazy. It's almost as if Jar Jar was meant for kids. Could you imagine that? It's weird to think that Jar Jar was meant for kids in a kid movie. Isn't that crazy? That's just crazy. Okay, no, but in all seriousness, I don't mind Jar Jar. I used to not like him, but as time has gone on, I respect what he's supposed to be. Jar Jar to me is supposed to represent that you're always supposed to have a sense of humor. Even if times are at their darkest, if you are at your lowest or you're feeling depressed, there is always a little bit of light inside you that you need to hold on to. And you know what? That's Jar Jar. So if you ask me, Jar Jar is one of the best characters because of that. You don't like it? Well, too bad, because I already said he's the best, so that's the way it is.
Number 7, does the Holdo maneuver make space battles redundant? No matter how you felt about the sequel trilogy, it must be admitted that those movies were visually stunning.
Yeah,
and
kind
no
of.
scene was as awe-inspiring as the moment when Vice Admiral Holdo committed the ultimate sacrifice. Piloting her ship into the oncoming First Order fleet, she engaged the hyperdrive and utterly destroyed her foes. It was a kinda take your breath away moment, but this also had huge implications for not only the future of Star Wars, but all the previous movies to date, and the fandom jumped right on it. And that's because if using a hyperdrive in this way was possible, then why was it the first time anybody had done it? With just a simple
Man,
push
Leia
of a
should have
button,
done
the
that.
Rebel Alliance could have avoided losing dozens of ships during both attacks on the Death Star. Of course, the Reddit community is filled with counter-arguments about why this was. Namely, that although it is possible, the logistics of such a maneuver are so complex that it simply would be too difficult to replicate on a regular basis.
They're going to give story reasons for why that's not super easy to do. They even mentioned in episode 9 about why don't we just do that again? And they're like, well, that was a 1 in a million shot. For me, I think the biggest issue with that scene is that Leia should have been the one who did it. I think that is the biggest issue. I think Holdo was not a respected enough character to pull such an awesome scene off. Leia should have been the one to do that. I think that would have ultimately been so much more cooler. And even though people would still have issues with it, I think people would be a lot more better off because like that was the way Leia would have went out. She would have went out with a bang. So that's the way it is.
Changing Force Ghosts. The retrospective changes George Lucas made to his original trilogy have long been a topic of contention among fans. The theatrical cuts of A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi were all considerably different to the 1997 special editions. Previously, cut scenes were added in, including Han's confrontation with Jabba in A New Hope, and other additions included digitized backgrounds and characters. Just prior to the release of Revenge of the Sith, Lucas made further changes for the 2004 DVD release of the original trilogy. As you might remember, the climax of Return of the Jedi saw Luke share a touching moment with the Force ghosts of his former teachers and father. It was heartwarming stuff, and originally Sebastian Shaw, who played Darth Vader, appeared as the redeemed Jedi Anakin Skywalker, but after the DVD release, Hayden Christensen was spliced in. On the one hand, this seemed like a clever way to tie the prequels and the originals together. On the other hand, it felt like a slight to the actor who portrayed Vader in his moment of redemption.
It's
not only that, but if Anakin really did bring balance to the Force, surely his Force ghost should represent him at the age at which it happened.
Nah, it's that's just more original trilogy supremacist babies, you know. That's fine. I never had a problem with that. I think it's fair. I mean, I guess I could understand an argument against it, but to like be so like driven into anger because of it, like some people get, no, it's not worth it. It's fine.
5. Luke's regressive story arc. Reducing Luke Skywalker to a bitter old hermit who drinks alien sea cow milk and has no interest in battling the Sith was one hell of a thing to do to the former savior of the galaxy. On the one hand, this subversion of expectations reminded audiences that even legendary heroes were susceptible to falling into despair. It also offered Rey a serious character development moment as well, as through Rey's steadfast tenacity and her willingness to resist the dark side and save Ben, Luke was encouraged to renew the fight against the Sith. Well, that's what the filmmakers were going for, and that's how some interpreted this plot point, but others didn't take kindly to it at all. Instead, they were perhaps rightly annoyed that Luke essentially just sulked on his island refuge until the ever-predictable Force ghost of Yoda showed up to give him a pep talk. Huge numbers of fans, including Mark Hamill, thought Luke's character was at best pitifully underused, and at worst had his legacy dragged through bantha crap. Number 4,
yeah, I mean, to be fair, all the original trilogy characters really just were not utilized correctly. Han Solo goes right back to being where he was in Episode 4. Luke is a completely different character. I get it. There's a 30-year span. Things change. I understand that. But to regress characters so much and then not even have the characters truly redeem themselves in a certain way. I guess you could say from a certain point of view, Luke's redemption is pretty interesting. And I could understand why people do like that. But the rest of his treatment, which is so wrong, I definitely think that Luke should have been the legendary Luke that we saw in the Legends and the Luke that we have been referred to. I think that Disney is going to rectify that now. They realize their mistake, and a lot of the things they're doing now is pretty much just pushing the sequels away, which is probably for the best. I know the people who do really like the sequels, and that's cool. Like I'm glad you like the sequels, but ultimately they break a lot of things with Star Wars that it's probably just best that we push them away for now and we come back to them later, or we just do like a separate timeline. You know, we have the World Between Worlds, we can open up a new timeline, we can do a new episode 7, 8, 9, we can explore a whole different universe, and those can still exist in a different timeline. I think that they should probably pursue something like that at this point. That's just me, of course, but that's how I feel.
Ewoks. Just like Jar Jar Binks, your perception of the Ewoks likely comes down to the age you were when you first saw them.
That's fair.
If you were a kid, the cute little fuzzy things made for a great cuddly toy. But if you were older, you likely saw them for what they ultimately became: a merchandising opportunity. It wouldn't be the last time George Lucas was accused of introducing characters that could later be used as a money grab either. With this one then, it all kind of depends on a matter of perspective. Sure, they look kinda dumb and they get totally manipulated by the rebellion, and there is the small detail of them wanting to cook and eat our heroes, but their miraculous victory over the stormtroopers also represents a central theme of Star Wars, that being the triumph of the underdog over the oppressor.
One of my favorite quotes ever is that it's not the size of a dog in a fight. It's the size of the fight in a dog. And that means regardless of how massive your opposition is, if you truly believe in something, it's all about how much you can fight for it. And I do respect the Ewoks for that standpoint. I do understand they were just made pretty much for merchandise. I get that. But for what they represent in the story, I think it's fine. Like it's fair. But I would get it if you don't like them. So, yeah, it is what it is.
The ambiguous moral compass of the Jedi.
Okay, this
The
is
Jedi
interesting.
have
Let's hear
long
this.
been considered the most noble and honorable people in the Star Wars universe. They wield extreme power, but only use it for good, or at least supposedly. They are the keepers of peace and the last and only real defense against the ever-rising dark side. Having said all of that, though, the Jedi did do some pretty reprehensible things, leading many in the fan community to reconsider their thoughts about these light side Force users. For starters, young Force-sensitive children were torn away from their parents at an extremely young age by the Jedi Order. This was purely so the individual could be indoctrinated, having the notions of love and attachment driven out of them, which does sound a little cult-like to me. The Jedi also became extremely dogmatic and rigid. The idea of individuality or autonomous thought was so rejected that it led them to shun extremely wise Jedi like Qui-Gon Jinn. Their ways even forced individuals like Count Dooku and Anakin Skywalker to join the dark side.
Yeah, that's something that people forget too. Is the Jedi were not perfect. And Luke actually explains that in Episode 8 too. The Jedi weren't perfect. They had their issues, like you mentioned about indoctrinating kids effectively without any true explanation to what's going on with the kid. The kid's just going to be a Jedi, and that's the way it's going to be. But you got to remember, to be a Jedi at the time was also a great honor. So for poor families, a good example, Anakin, that was a great opportunity for Anakin to go and be a Jedi and to make a difference, and be great. So I always thought that was cool. So while our Jedi are the good guys, they are just another section of religion in this universe. You have your Jedi, you have your Sith, and at the end of the day, there's the light and the dark side, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are a Jedi if you're in the light. And if you're on the dark side, that doesn't mean you're a Sith. You can be able to do both. The problem is the Jedi are too far left on the light side scale, and the dark side is too far right on the dark side scale. That's what I was mentioning earlier about Luke. Luke is kind of like the middle man, or at least what he was supposed to be as far as legends go. He was supposed to be the Jedi who was able to use both dark and light to effectively do good for everyone. It all comes down to the user essentially, but yeah, the Republic Jedi, they were flawed for sure. And they only truly realized it after they fell. That's usually the way it goes.
Actual Chosen One. The Chosen One prophecy is the
He's
catalyst that triggers the entire Skywalker saga. The central conflict of the story is all about bringing balance to the Force. In the original trilogy, Luke is presented as the one who will overthrow the Sith and restore balance, but as it turns out, Darth Vader actually does this when he kills the Emperor. For all of their issues, the prequels did a wonderful job of giving background to these events. Although Qui-Gon Jinn did not see the horror that Anakin would bring to the galaxy, he was correct in believing that he would ultimately destroy the Sith and fulfill the prophecy. That was until the sequel trilogy anyway. With the return of Darth Sidious and the rise of Skywalker, all of that kinda went out the window.
Yeah.
Now, this film skips over exactly how he came back, merely offering a line from Poe Dameron that says, somehow Palpatine returned.
Yeah.
No matter the intricacies of how this happened, Palpatine did come back, and Rey eventually destroyed him, once again bringing balance to the Force. But if Palpatine wasn't really dead at the end of Return of the Jedi, then were the Sith ever really destroyed by Anakin? You can see why this one divided people. I mean, the Chosen One prophecy is the plot point that underpins the entire conflict of the first two trilogies, and Anakin's redemption arc is what made this story so loved, and the sequels kinda undermined that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just one of those things where you just kind of have to forget about that in the sequels. I mean, I wish they would have just included more of Anakin in the sequel trilogy. I know that at the time they didn't really like Hayden as much. Hayden's having a big renaissance now, so they definitely would have put him in if they were making it now, but they didn't. What should have happened was, instead of Rey being Palpatine's granddaughter or whatever, she should have been the Force reincarnation of Anakin. She should have been the Force effectively remaking Anakin to rebalance the Force, or officially finish what Anakin started. So I think that would have been cool.
You shot first.
Sequels, that's all you can say.
We've already discussed how George Lucas went about altering his original movies over the years, and for the most part, these changes were kinda inconsequential. But one change that will forever keep fans talking is the infamous face-off between Han Solo and the bounty hunter Greedo. In the most readily available versions of A New Hope, Han is forced to shoot Greedo after he pulls a blaster on him. Dodging the bounty hunter's shot, Solo returned fire with deadly accuracy. In the theatrical release, of course, Solo just blasted Greedo while he was flapping his mouth. This all boils down to Lucas's concern that he'd originally depicted Solo as a brutal killer. Thus, he altered the scene to make Han more sympathetic, and over the years, this has been altered numerous times further, with the firing rate being sped up or slowed down to make the scene that bit more ambiguous.
Okay, so this is my perspective on that scene. Alright, I do get asked this a lot. I don't care. I think it's open to interpretation. You know what I mean? In a way, no one else really saw that go down. The only person who knew what happened in that situation was Han. So when Han later tells the story, he can tell it however he wishes. So however you think Han would tell the story, then that is the way it is. I know it's a big point of contingency for a lot of people. I think it's not a big deal. I don't think it's worth anyone's time to talk about it. But hey, that's just me. What do you guys think? Did you agree with this list? Did you disagree with this list? What are some controversies they didn't cover that you guys want to talk about in the comments? Maybe I'll do like a follow-up video on those. So let me know down below. And of course, for more videos like this, make sure to like, subscribe, turn notifications. If you find any cool videos like this you want to see me react to or give my opinion on, like I said, go to the Net Entertainment Discord. There's a link down there. Make sure to click it, join the Discord. We have a nice community over there. You can go hang out. Go to the suggestion tab, leave your suggestion, and make sure to leave the link with it. Because recently, YouTube has started getting rid of links and comments, so you can't leave links anymore down there. So you have to make sure to go to the Net Entertainment Discord to be able to do that. But that's it for now, guys. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.